Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. I think it's actually early morning right now for one of our presenters too. Welcome to Cybersecurity Defense in Depth. I'm my co-host James. James, how you been?
I've been fantastic, Brandon. How are you doing?
It's been busy. It's been busy. The last month since we last did this was been pretty busy. A lot of transitions, a lot of things happening, a lot of stuff happening in the cybersecurity world.
Absolutely. Forever and ongoing, watching the military engaging Colonial, all the counter news, people being counterproductive, people attacking, people counterattacking. When's the wave going to end?
I don't think it is. I mean, this is it was funny. I was in a conversation today and they were saying, okay, like, do you really have to know as much as you say you need to know? Like, are you always learning your head in a book or reading an article? I said, yeah. I said, look at this. Imagine your phone, right? How many if you have an iPhone, how many times do you see updates coming out daily, weekly for all the apps you have? And their answer to that was like, yeah, like I have about 14 updates today alone. Now imagine that in an infrastructure, right? In a company with all different software and all different servers and, routers, switches, hubs, IDS, IPS, all this constantly updating, constantly being monitored. Why do you think we're constantly doing it? And then now there's the next generation evolution. So there's now an update and then a patch on top of that. And now it has to be tested to make sure it doesn't open up any vulnerabilities. And now if it's just a third-party supplier, they have to make sure, because this you're talking about like, SolarWinds and Colonial and all this. We're looking at different types of technology. It's just never ending for us, which is great to have a career in, but it's hard to be in because we always are learning.
Yep, absolutely. And you know what? The world will continue. And even though it may seem bleak from the news perspective of looking at cyber attacks and potential cyber warfare, you know what? At the end, there will be a solution. And that solution means that those people from cybersecurity need to get together, remove those hats, and start working together in order to solve the problem.
I think there's going to be better process. I mean, I know the conversation that you're going to be talking about later today is there's going to be better teamwork, better collaboration, better worldwide collaboration, not just, country, state, province, wherever you are, but worldwide collaboration on security programs, controls, what needs to be done at a global level versus, your organizational level, military. I think that's what we're looking at right now. And it's going to enhance security. And I think, again, security is always this, tennis game. The hackers are all hacking on one side, we're trying to secure on the other side, and it's just this ping pong we're playing. But we're going to try to get better. We're going to try to get better at responding, because I think a lot of times we're tied with one hand behind our back trying to do security because we have to follow the rules. We have to follow change management. We have to follow a lot of things, where hackers, I don't have to follow anything. I could just do it. Get in front of my keyboard and go.
You know what the real shame is? During COVID, more and more people have time in lockdown in order to sit on their computers and do a lot of things which they normally wouldn't do with the high unemployment rates and so on. And this really gives people the incentive to go, hey, I'm not getting any money from the government, so I'll just go and get my own money. And that's the true shame.
Right. Well, they're becoming enthusiasts of being entrepreneurs, but not in the best, positive way and ethical way.
People could take those negative thoughts and convert them into good thoughts. You know what? The world could just start to become a better place.
True. Very true. So I'd like to thank everyone. I want to give you guys some time to get in. Let us know where you're from, what you're interested in learning today. We're watching all the chats from YouTube to Twitch, Facebook, live on all different platforms right now. So let us know what platform you're on, where you're from, and what are you kind of interested in learning about cybersecurity. So James, I'm going to jump in, just kind of let us know what we're going to be covering tonight, and get on with our show, our live stream tonight.
Enjoy the show, everyone.
Okay, so today we're actually excited. We're going to have two presentations today. Just give me a second here. All right, we're going to have Dr. Gonzo and James Castle are actually going to be both a presenter. Our co-host is actually been presenting today. So like I said, 2 presenters. This meetup is going to be recorded, so it's live stream right now. Ask your live questions, keep them going. Let us know as we're going through the actual stream if you have any questions. If you have to go and there's something you might miss, it's going to be recorded. So it's going to be recorded on our YouTube channel, on mine. So you can come and check it out and you can go watch the recording. Also, if you have a colleague or friend that you want to share this out with, because you think this information is valuable, please share that out with them, because it's essential we continue this conversation, we continue the education going through. Again, there's going to be Q&A all through the presentation, so just to make sure you guys get enough value and information. So our first presenter, which can be up next, has over 20 years of experience in information and cybersecurity, ranging from developing one of the first university master programs in the UK in 2005 up to security consultancy and strategic advisory for private and government organizations across Europe, Africa, Middle East, and Asia. He is the CEO of Silec, and a multi-international information security technology and consulting firm, and the global chairman of HLB Digital, a brand of HLB International, where he leads the development of HLB cybersecurity and digital services globally. He is a cybersecurity expert for the International Telecommunication Union, where since 2004, he has contributed to the delivery of cyber drills and workshops for their national certs and governments around the world, including the 2020 World Cyber Drill, where he was the technical coordinator for the cyber attack and simulation scenarios. He is the co-founder of Cyber Ranges, a next-generation cyber range platform, and he's also the co-chair of the European Cybersecurity Organization, working group on cyber range environments and technical exercise. So a lot of value, a lot of information there. And then, of course, we got James here, Executive Director of the Cybersecurity Global Alliance, operating under Terra Nova Defense, non-for-profit, President and Director of Terra Nova Defense Solutions Incorporated, is a multi-sector corporation specializing in cybersecurity, aerospace, maritime, defense, unmanned vehicles, and communication. James started Terra Nova Defense Solutions in 2014 in the public safety and emergency management sector. In 2018, James was invited to speak as a special witness before the TRAN committee at the House of Commons Parliament in Ottawa as a subject matter expert in unmanned vehicles and the future of drones in Canada. Terra Nova Defense was elected as one of the Canadians' top defense companies in both 2020 and 2021. So again, a lot of great value, a lot of great information. Make sure you ask lots of questions. So that's going to be our speakers for today. Just give me a second here. Now let me bring in Dr. Allen here. Just give me a second here.
Hi.
How are you doing?
Very well, very well. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're quite welcome. So you ready to go?
Very well, yes. Ready.
Awesome. So I'm going to bring up your presentation, and I look forward to learning a lot from what you're going to present today.
Thank you. So just before I start, just if you can confirm you can see my screen.
Yep, we're all good.
Fantastic. Okay, so once more, very happy to be here and sharing this presentation with you, and I look forward to some questions from the audience. So today I want to address the topic of next generation cyber ranges in general, and I'm going to cover a number of things: experiential learning, what is a cyber range, use cases, assessing cyber resilience and attack simulations, and they're all very much related to cyber range technology. Just as a brief aside, as I was being introduced, we are a company. We are based in Cyprus HQ, but we also have operations in Canada, in US, Kenya, and United Kingdom. And with regards to the cyber range domain, we are a vendor of cyber range technology, independent vendor. We run our own cloud infrastructure. We also have our range available on premise or portable, and it is also an ISO 27001 certified range. And also a lot of the experience that I want to share with you today is based on many years of working using cyber range technology to deliver attack simulation, cyber exercises, and our platform is actually the official platform used by the UN for the World Drill. The second edition will be again in October 2021 this year. And for those also who want to learn more about cyber range and next generation cyber range, I also recommend this paper that we wrote at EXO, and it's free to download. It's a paper where we address the topic of cyber ranges and trying to understand basically what a next generation cyber range is. So why have cyber range technology products have become very popular in the last two years? If you think about the way security professionals go through the career development and sort of become expert, or for those who become expert, they follow a traditional path, from education or university, job interview, then skills development, which is effectively going on to training courses or self-learning, and then application of skills, which is applying those skills into a real environment. So I'm studying to become a SOC analyst, then I get hired as a SOC analyst, and then I study more and apply more skills until I become a SOC manager, or along that path. The problem is that in order for me to go through this loop of continuous learning and application of skills and professional development, I actually need to spend quite a lot of time, and that is always a problem. So it's a problem for the individual because it takes time to obviously mature experience, but it's also a problem for an organization because the only way they can sort of ensure that the person is competent is to put that person to the test on the job, and sometimes obviously it's a long process. One of the key technology or solutions to the continual professional development and the application of experiential learning has been recognized to be a cyber range. This prediction from Gartner is quite sort of already surpassed, and according to Gartner, a couple of years ago, by 2022, 15% of large enterprises will be using the cyber range. The truth is that number is already well above 15%, and many organizations are already looking at cyber ranges to increase their training capabilities, especially government and large organizations. Now, when we think of a cyber range, or when many people think of a cyber range, they usually think of something like this. So on the left, you've got the annual NATO cyber exercise, Lock Shield, and then you have the on the right you have the training center, large training center. Now this is still true, and there are some organizations that still run obviously a traditional cyber range such as that, but basically traditionally a cyber range has been considered as a let's say a training facility or a simulation facility where you physically go to get trained or to go to experience simulation. In reality, that's sort of an old definition or an old view of a cyber range, and what we have defined in the last year, and it's continuing to be more and more developed, is a next generation cyber range. Now, if you look at a traditional cyber range, it was originally identified as a simulation environment, something that could be simulate an ICT or OT infrastructure, ideally also with attack simulation, but pretty much that's what it was. It was defined as a simulation environment, and then on top of it, you would achieve a number of things. You would be able to do training, security testing, and so on. With the with the development and maturity and the adoption of cloud technology and agent-based attack simulation, the simulation of environments, or ICT, OT, have become much more evolved, and therefore, instead of just having traditional virtualization, we now have cloud technologies. We have process virtualization. We have physical emulation, and then you have an orchestrator in the middle that gives access to the different ways of simulating an infrastructure. And then there are a number of applications that allow these simulation to be used. And therefore, as a definition, cyber range is no longer a simulation environment, but is a platform which a platform for the development and delivery of simulation environment. In other words, the definition takes into consideration the fact that we are not only creating a simulation environment, but we need to be able to use that environment. And for that, we need to have attack simulation, user simulation, scoring and reporting, scenario or simulation environment, composition capabilities, competency management. And the result is something like this, whereby you have a simulated environment. In this case, it's an ICT environment. Then you have multiple users or teams that are involved in the simulation. So you have attacker, defenders, you have observers, and then the system would simulate traffic or simulate attacks or be subject to real attacks. And from a use case, so this is one example of a use case, but you can understand that for an organization, in order to be able to use such an environment, there needs to be a number of functionalities which usually are not just part of the simulation environment. So the traditional approach to simulation is, let's set up an environment, let's power on the button, and then let's send people some credentials, let's develop a web application on top which allows people to interact with one another. And so it was a layered approach. In a next generation cyber range, all these functionalities, as I was showing, they tend to be integrated, whereby you don't need to do multiple steps, but everything is taken care of by the platform in a orchestrated, automated way. And that takes me to the next point, which is orchestration. So orchestration is, from a conducting viewpoint and from a cloud perspective, is the functionality offered by the cloud providers. If you think about Amazon or Azure or any others, to make to the user, to make the process of managing the virtual environments, the virtual machine, shutting down, powering off, to make that entire process completely transparent, so that the cloud layer is managing the entire physical infrastructure transparently from the user. If you think of a cyber range, of a next generation cyber range, that orchestration is not just limited to the management of the environment, but is extended to the orchestration of the attack simulation, or the user management, or the reporting side, or the creation of the environment. So a lot of the functionalities of the cyber range are then exposed to the user. Now, how can we use next generation cyber ranges for various purposes? So one of the key purposes that we have been using ourselves, but also we've noticed a lot, an increasing trend, is cyber resilience. Now, cyber resilience is the ability of the organization to withstand an attack that is affecting their ICT or OT infrastructure, and to continue operating. So it's effectively an evolved version of the business continuity. But since now every environment is connected to IT, and even in the DOT, in the traditional OT world, we are talking about cyber physical system. Any attack will eventually affect the ICT infrastructure. So we're talking about cyber resilience, and many organizations need to understand or need to assess their ability to their level of cyber resilience. And it involves a number of components, just like business continuity, because you have it's a top-down approach. The leadership of the organization needs to recognize the importance of this and therefore allocate resources for the development and the assessment. Then we need to have obviously people. There needs to be a culture of resilience. There are processes that need to be followed. Incident response. You have the infrastructure, the security control. Overall, you need to sort of test at different levels. And traditionally, when you're doing assessment of cyber resilience, you deal with either tabletop-based exercises or discussion-based. These are very good for evaluating understanding of processes, identify maybe some improvement area in the execution of a process, but they are pretty much discussion based. Then you have the technical operational one, which are more of hands-on. So, is my team able to identify a specific type of attack? Is he able to perform incident response? But really what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to do an end-to-end assessment. So we want to be able to simulate a real attack, let's say a phishing campaign or a specific APT with specific TTP, so tactics, techniques, and procedures. And we want to be able to understand if the organization at a organizational level, so at people and process level, is able to manage this type of security incident. Therefore, we need to be able to test both the management and the operational people at the same time. So this is what we call C2 drills or cross-cyber drill, where basically you have injections or simulation which are affecting both the management and the technical team. Example could be a phishing email. So the CEO of the company has just been phished. Now there is obviously a managerial reaction, but it's also now a technical reaction to understand what is the impact. Has it been compromised? Has there been any malware? Has there been any propagation of the malware? And from a risk perspective, what the CEO should be doing, confidentiality of the information, what should be considered already leaked, and so on. So you really want to understand what are the communication, the interaction between the management and the operational people, so the operational staff. And one of the key things about being able to perform this cyber resilience assessment is actually the ability to simulate attacks. And one of the key sort of areas of contention at the moment, well, it's not really contention, but it's more about understanding and education, is the difference between breach and attack simulation and attack simulation sort of using cyber ranges. There are many ways that effectively an organization can simulate attacks in order to assess their cyber resilience or to assess their security posture. And let's look at different ways. So first of all, we need to distinguish between simulation and emulation. So simulation replicates the behavior and actions of an attacker, but it implements them differently. Typical example is a phishing simulator, where the user receives, let's say, a real email. However, the attachment is not malicious. If the user clicks on the attachment, then a pop-up window comes that says, you've been phished. If this was a real email, then you would be compromised, and so on and so forth. But the impact is not there because we're only mimicking the behavior of the attacker. When we're talking about emulation, instead, we are actually simulating the attacker by replicating, by using the exact same techniques, the exact same sort of tools, malware that the attacker would be using, only that we are doing that in a sandbox environment, which is, again, traditionally a range or a cyber range. And therefore, we are using real system, but we are basically just emulating the purpose of the system. So if we want to take a typical financial institution, we can have a core banking system or an e-banking application, which is then installed as a replica into a cyber range, and then the attack emulation goes on in there. Then you also have red team simulation. Many of you are familiar with this, and these are tailor-made attacks onto an organization with a specific scope of work, specific rules of engagement, specific do's and don'ts, and the objective is to simulate the strength. Sorry, to verify to assess the strength of the organization to face a real attacker with specific motivations, specific capabilities, and see what that type of attacker could be able to achieve. Typical example is the Cyber EU framework in the EU, which is was developed by the European Central Bank. And as you can see, this framework provides a lot of guidance on how to how to procure and deliver a red team simulation. And as you can see, there are guidelines for every phase of the project, from the initiation to the closure. And as you can see also from here, the entire process lasts weeks, in fact lasts months, and that if the company has already decided to engage in such activities. So attack simulation using red teams is not something that you do every day. It's probably something you do once a year, and at best twice a year. Then you have attack simulation tools, which are effectively just that. They are tools, they are offensive tools, which are used by security professionals, for example, in the execution of red team attack simulation, or sometimes in penetration testing. But really, they are tools that allow a professional to mimic in fact, to actually perform the activity of an attacker using, for example, setting up command and control servers, backdoor, data exfiltration. And so there are some examples that are both open source or commercial. It's quite a lot out there. And then finally we get to the breach and attack simulation. Now, they have become extremely popular, and we were having a discussion with a partner today where they were saying, many of our clients ask us, how can we, for example, the Colonial Pipeline hack. Many clients would ask, am I vulnerable to that? Could I be attacked? And what tool can I use to verify if I'm vulnerable or not? The question is, can I use a cyber range to verify that, or should I use a breach and attack simulation for that? Now, this is a typical question where I would say probably a breach and attack simulation tool is more appropriate, because a breach and attack simulation can, if configured properly or depending on the solution, can allow you to mimic the behavior of a specific attacker, and therefore to mimic the behavior of, let's say a TTP of a specific threat actor. What it does, it simulates, it's an agent-based technology, and it simulates these attacks on the production environment. But, and here comes the distinction between simulation and emulation, they're simulating the behavior of the attacker, because they're not really using the real malware or the real tools, because it's on production. It will obviously affect production. However, is able to perform tests that mimic the behavior. So, in a case of a ransomware, instead of infecting the company with real ransomware, it would mimic the behavior of the ransomware and say, can I write to disk, or can I have access to a administrator folder? And therefore, it will write a file, but it will not, encrypt, let's say, the hard disk. And by doing that, I am able to see if the security tools and the security controls of my organization have been deployed effectively, and to somewhat assess the security posture of the organization. And then, they also provide you with feedback. So breach and attack simulation tools are really audit tools which a company can utilize to verify their, let's say, their exposure to certain type of attacks. Now, when you talk about, and again, continue with the Colonial Pipeline, a breach and attack simulation may help you, but not necessarily, because obviously it depends on if it can simulate something or not. But assuming that it can, then it will help you in telling you if you are vulnerable, to what extent you are. But the question is also, would my staff or would my security staff be able to identify this attack? Would it be able to respond? Would it be able to act on it and identify the right corrective actions? Well, that you cannot do with the breach and attack simulation, because, as I said, they are only simulating the behavior. They are not using the real malware. They are not using the real tools and the technique used by the attacker. What instead you can do in a cyber range is you can create a replica environment, or to the extent that you need to have a replica environment. So you probably would have your own SIEM, your EDR, some key component, and then you would simulate the attack using real tools, real malware, and you would then verify if the team is able to detect that malware, is able to maybe perform reverse engineering activities, and so on and so forth. And when it comes to next generation cyber ranges, and this is really the importance of the orchestration and automation. So if you look at 99% of the cyber ranges out there, they are based on creating the simulation environment, then maybe putting a attack simulator on top. Some of the cyber range use, for example, attack simulation tools like the one I was showing you earlier, and then they bring the user in and say, okay, now deal with it. Now, as you can understand, that is the same as imagine that you're playing a multiplayer game. You are everybody maybe is familiar with PlayStation and Xbox, and imagine that either with friends or with children and so on. Every time you want to play a multiplayer game, you have to say, hold on 1 second, and someone comes in and sets up the game for you. Now, with the next generation cyber range, that's really the opposite of what happens, because all the setup of the environment and the simulation of the attacks happens with one click. And therefore, okay, so I want to simulate the Colonial Pipeline. Okay, let me pick up the scenario, let me click play, and let's see if my team is able to detect that particular attack. Examples include of this simulation are what we are doing for the UN, for example, where you would have different teams simulating, representing a different country, each having access to a separate simulated infrastructure, all of which are connected to one another. And then with the attack simulation, you're able to then inject real malware and attacks, and the malware can propagate from one country to another. And then you can actually now simulate two things. You can say the inter-country communication, do people know each other? Do they follow protocol? What protocol do they follow? From a technical viewpoint, can they share, like, for example, last year we had a malware, which we developed a malware for the exercise, which was a blockchain malware, and whereby once it started infecting all the different countries, then the only way for the malware to be for the decryption, because the malware ended up encrypting files. So for the only way for the file to be decrypted, at least 3 countries had to be participating and vote in the blockchain sort of malware to be able to then decrypt. And therefore, we were testing the ability of the technical teams to not only solve the exercise, but also share and initiate communication with other countries. Therefore, if you're looking at cyber resilience, and hence my connection now to the attack simulation, there are many ways that an organization can do attack simulation. You have the red team, you can use the tools, you can use breach and attack simulations, and you can use cyber ranges. But really, the ones that are used for cyber resilience is either a red team simulation, which has the advantage of being extremely realistic and custom, but the disadvantage that it can not be done more than once or twice a year. It's very costly. And it also is done on production systems, so it's never going to be sort of full scope. An attack simulation and range, once you've created a replica environment, then you can execute that as often as you like, and you can update the attacks to cover recent and current and relevant attacks to your organization. And then, for the other application, obviously security training. Remember what I said at the beginning. when I was talking about experiential learning, in order for me to go from beginner to expert, I need to go and execute, sort of roll out the continuous improvement wheel of learning new skills, applying skills, learning skills, and applying skills. And therefore, a next generation cyber range will be able to automate that process without the interference of someone to set up the simulation environment. To conclude on breach and attack simulation, they are mostly audit tools. Okay, so and they will not simulate the real attack. They only simulate the behavior. So this is a very important distinction, which we are making all the time to a number of organizations that approach us or they approach our partners when we try to explain the difference between breach and attack simulation solutions and attack simulation using cyber ranges. And finally, another aspect that I want to cover is large-scale skills development. And you have training, recruitment. So these are two important use cases. If I want to train thousands of people, we are talking about over 4 million security professionals that need to be trained and retrained today because of the shortage and the skills gap. Now, many countries are rolling out national capacity building program whereby they're trying to train and introduce through university and accelerate the learning process to bring more people through introduce more people to the security profession. Now, you can't do that in the traditional method. You have to use, especially if you want to train hands-on and through provide experiential learning, you cannot do that unless you have a technology that allows you to do that and to scale. So therefore, to do that, but also that has a large level of automation and orchestration, because you can provide a cyber range, but if I have to take people to a physical cyber range 30 at a time, that is only X number of people that I can train in 1 year. But if you use a automated cloud-based, web-based type of solution, then I can train thousands of people in a much more parallel way. And the other one is recruitment, and this is something that we have done now for quite some time. We run a SOC, a 24/7 SOC, and so one of the things that we do regularly is hiring SOC analysts. And because of the numbers and the scale, we have the security skills gap, and the fact that you don't find security professionals sort of falling from the tree. We have developed an accelerated onboarding process and training program. But before that, we basically have to go through the recruitment. Now, traditionally, when you have a recruitment process, it can take weeks, months, and depending on the number of candidates that you get. The last recruitment exercise that we did, we received about 600 applications. And what we normally do, and in that case, that's what we did, we do a direct skills assessment on the range without even looking at the CV. So let's say we have 600 people. It's okay, next week at this time, this is the link, you will do a competence assessment. And what happens is there already 20% of people just don't turn up, which is just a very quick way of skimming the additional candidates. Then those who pass, in that particular instance, we did another test, which is a little bit more difficult. The first one was more a baseline. The second one is one a little bit more advanced. And then from those, we ended up looking at the CVs of those who passed. And then from the CV, we then selected a subset. So from 600 people, we ended up interviewing, I think, between 15 and 20 people, and then we hired 3 people. And that's a process that is very quick and very efficient. And it has the advantage of identifying ideal candidates beyond the CV. And it has happened more than once, and it keeps on happening, that through this process, we select people that we would normally not have selected if we were only looking at the CV. And we did that actually this year. as an experiment to, as a parallel process. National cybersecurity competitions, these have become extremely popular all over the world, and many competition, they are obviously aimed at raising talents and increasing the number of students that get into the security profession. The problem is that, again, if you want to do a national cybersecurity competition at experiential level, whereby you really give people practical challenges and assessments, then you do need a technology that can scale to thousands of people and that can provide, parallel, concurrent, a large number of concurrent virtual machines. So that's why a lot of the modern, so a lot of the cyber ranges today are cloud-based and are actually based on public cloud providers such as Google and Azure. The problem is that many of these don't actually do they are not next generation cyber ranges, and they don't do actually the attack simulation that is required. So they are traditionally used only for simple scenarios. Finally, before I conclude and leave the floor for questions, there is always a comment that I like to make regarding next generation cyber ranges. There are two. If you look at the way technology is adopted, there's always an adoption curve where you have early adopters, and then you finally have the followers, and eventually you have the majority of people that on board. But there are two triggers that have brought cyber range to the world right now. One is cloud technology, and the other one is attack simulation, agent-based attack simulation. Cloud technology is because of the orchestration, because it takes care of the environment very easily, and that's why the majority of the ranges are actually right now effectively online through Google and Amazon. The second is agent-based attack simulation, which basically means I'm now able to simulate attacks into the range using agents rather than appliances. And these two technological sort of triggers have determined the widespread of cyber range in the last 2 years. The click and play learning environment, which are not really ranges as such, but they focus on the skills development. And then now the more next generation type cyber ranges where the agent-based attack simulation is built in. And to give you an example, the NATO cyber range project only started last year, mid last year, I think it was, and it's been now built on high level of orchestration automation. So beware that many of the cyber ranges that are out there, especially the ones that are, let's say, older than 2 years, are not next generation cyber ranges, and they require multiple components to implement the same use cases. It's a long subject. I can talk for hours, so I think I'll just end my presentation here, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That was amazing. A lot of great information. Now, I know Carlota had a question. Thank you for your presentation. I have a question. How effective would it be to build resilience when the company is not under regional rules? I'll bring this up here. It's not bringing up regional rules such as EU framework, but it is a global organization.
Well, that's why I actually said in the slide, there are many components, and one of the things is leadership. So cyber resilience always begins from the leadership. So if the leadership believes that cyber resilience is very important, then it can be achieved. And from a global organization viewpoint, even if it's under the EU framework, actually using a cyber range is making that process very easy, or much easier to simulate, because imagine a multinational and you have multiple locations, and every office will be given access to a simulation environment, which they're all connected. And therefore you now start simulating attacks on the infrastructure, and now the same teams that day-to-day collaborate or don't collaborate, they're now forced to react to a problem, to an incident, and collaborate. And we have clients that and I know organizations where for example, it's either a telco or a financial institution, and the same telco, the same bank gets attacked all over the world, and they're basically targeting the bank. And if you're able to simulate a similar scenario, then you're actually preparing to detect and respond, compared to the cyber threat intelligence will tell the feeds and information will tell you, look, these attackers with these tools, with this IOC that you will appear, be prepared. So the organization does scanning, preventive measures, search for IOC, and so on. What you can do with the cyber range, you can say, I'm going to now inject the real thing. I'm telling you that it's coming. Now let me show you what it looks like when it really hits you. And let's see if you're able to detect, communicate, collaborate. That's the approach.
Awesome. So next question from Mike. How do you ensure cyber range integrity from bad actors monitoring of cyber range exercises?
It's always about deployment. Many countries or organizations, they really go for on-premise solutions. And that's why, for example, if you want to run such an environment on the cloud, then you need to understand where that cloud provider is located, in which country. So many countries, and in Europe, it's also an example, but they are developing national cloud initiatives where the data is stored, in their specific environment. But if you then obviously have that if you want to go a step further, then you deploy the cyber range on premise, and you have total control over the data that is generated during the cyber exercise, and you can choose not to share that. You control that.
Now, going that a little bit deeper, I mean, like you're talking about the threats that are happening, and you guys are doing like a great job of giving them real world scenarios. Like, here it is. This is what's happening. This is what's going to light up on your SIM. This is what's going to be the alerts. Here you go. Now go. How are you going to respond to this? What if it's a real situation? Are they going to kind of have the same resources and integrity and be able to do that, not knowing like your team is there? Do you know what I mean?
No, not quite. So
most companies you have like SIM, you have your security analyst, level 1, level 2, and they're monitoring all that, looking at false positives, false negatives. But when you're working in an engagement, they're more on a high alert, right? They're more aware that this is coming versus, SolarWinds. They're kind of like,
correct,
yeah, it's happening.
It's a fair question, but it's the same question that I got many times. For many years, I was involved also in doing compliance audits. Okay, and when you go through a compliance audit, or even when you go for a car MOT, the annual test for your car,
the emissions,
no, unit inspection, right?
Yeah.
All the exams that people know that are coming, from when you are a student to the car test to compliance audit, everyone know that they're coming, right? They still fail. So the fact that you are warned doesn't mean that you are, given an advantage. It means that you know what's coming, and you are given a chance to prove yourself. So true, they may be more on alert, but it doesn't mean that it's easier. In fact, one may argue that they may be more under stress because now they're being assessed. When you are in a real environment, there are many things you can say. Well, he was on leave. I was not aware. It was not my turn. Many things. But if you are in an environment where you are put under test, and maybe there is a report, there is an assessment that says you were not able to identify that, that's a lot of pressure, and that changes also the context. So I don't think is any more difficult or any easier. I think it's somewhat a fair reflection of what would happen in reality.
Right, because the reason why I asked, you brought up compliance, right? A lot of companies, when they know compliance certifications coming up, they're now deep in it, making sure they have their logs. Do we meet all the controls? Make sure you update all the control points. And then day one, they get their certificate, or at least, they pass. And then they go, okay, we don't need to worry about that. We're going to move on to the other 200 projects that we're working on because we're compliant now. We don't need to manage this. And so kind of same type of scenario. Like if I know a company, we're going to do a pen test or anything, they're like, you're going to have a purple team pen test. You guys got to be ready. Make sure the blue team has done their job. Make sure everyone's watching. Now keep your eyes right on the screen because an alert comes up. You better be watching that, like all that.
And let me ask you, what is the outcome of that? When a company knows that, there's a pen test coming, what's the outcome of that frenziness that goes, around?
Oh, it's massive stress. It's falling behind on projects. I get it. Like
exactly. So basically, that's and I'm not saying that people should be doing it only when that happens, but that's why compliance and regular compliance or regular audits or regular testing or regular attack simulation exercises, the objective is that, and that's why I'm talking about culture. If you embed these activities into the culture, into the regular activities of the organization, then it doesn't become something that you do, 1 quarter every year, but it's something that you do. So it now becomes easier. Security, as we all know, even us that work in security, it's something that, it's annoying sometimes. It's an extra step that you have to do to be secure. But if you trying to make that more regular and build it into the business practice, it becomes more tolerable and easier to do. So yes, it's not a perfect solution, but there is a benefit even in doing that once a quarter. There is a benefit.
Now, do you recommend people having their in-house team do it or an external team?
Okay, I recommend a sort of a combination because if you have an external team do it, which is what happens at the moment all the time, because it's like, the 99% of the ranges are not automated. So if you want to simulate something, you got to have it set up. And so that becomes expensive because if you have to bring in someone to do that all the time, it's expensive. So you want to be able to allow a team to click a button and say, okay, there is a new attack that came last week. Let me push this through. Let's see if it happens. Okay. If I'm ready. And then you say, actually, that was interesting. I'm not sure I would be prepared. Maybe I can get someone to help me out and explain that to me better. And then you can, choose when to have that extra level of service. But ideally, you want to have the ability to do this attack simulation on a regular basis and in a self-initiated way without, having to call for, professional services.
No, yeah, and I think the reason why I asked that question, I think it's a hybrid approach that sometimes your internal team, not all the time, but sometimes your internal team kind of fixes as they go, and you're not. It's like bandage fixes. They patch things and just make sure it works versus full remediation, where an outside team will go, no, here's a full remediation port. No, don't give me. There's a roadmap. It doesn't mean you have to fix everything today, but there's a roadmap on. Here's some critical things. Here's some low, like mid-range, and here's some low. Where the inside team will go, no, don't worry, I fixed that. It's fine, right? And it's some sort of hybrid approach to maintain things.
In fact, that's my favorite part of any attack simulation is the lessons learned, because a lot of the times, and just I think it's a long discussion there, but I think there is the approach to learning that many people sort of follow, which is more focused on the results than on the method. So people focus on getting the answers right rather than understanding why that is the answer. The problem is in many cases, incident responders focus on the symptom and they cure the symptom, okay? But they don't look beyond and understand what is the root cause, what is the actual, how the attack happened, what really happened. And we have some exercises where everything seems to have been patched, fixed, and everybody's about to cheer up and open the beer, and then something else happens that says, shit, I know. I didn't realize, maybe, it's deeper than that, and it's much deeper. And that's where, and you can have decoy, where, the attack makes you focus on something so that they divert your attention from something else that is really happening. And then, you fix that problem, but what really happened, just passed you by, and, you don't have a clue.
Oh, for sure. And that's real world, right? They can do the misdirection, right? It's like magic. Yeah, look over here, look at the alerts while they're doing reconnaissance over here, right?
Exactly.
Downloading data, and you're like, what just happened? Like, yeah, the firewall was getting hit, but over here they got like 10 gigabytes of financial data.
Exactly.
So, for sure. Awesome. Anything else? What's the best way for them to get a hold of you if they had any questions?
I believe, let me check if I put my email at the beginning. Yes, I think I did. So it's al@silensec. So it's a very simple email. So it's al and then the company name. So al@silensec.com.
Okay, so if you guys have it, take a second, write it down, screen grab that, make sure you got it. If you guys have any questions for Al, let him know. Al, thank you so much for the presentation. It was amazing to learn, just what you guys are working on, how you guys are applying this, and how you're helping the industry.
You can also reach our head of operations in Canada also, and he is on cyberranges.com. It's Michael@cyberranges.com.
Michael, okay, perfect. So yeah, guys, if you have questions about that, post it in the chat. We can make sure you guys get the information. Al, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you to you. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So James, you're up.
All right, Brandon. Thank you very much.
Great presentation. What'd you think?
That was an amazing presentation. I'm glad we let him go first. The competition is on. Now I got to really push the envelope.
So do you have your presentation ready to go? I
do. Yeah.
I'm just gonna get you to share it on the screen so I can bring it up. There we go.
Come on. There it goes.
Awesome.
All right. All set. First of all, before I get going, I just want to say, being one of the co-hosts here, it's an absolute pleasure being able to come out and talk about the Cybersecurity Global Alliance. But before I move on, one of the attendees today, Carlota, is our legal committee director, and she is here, paged in from the Netherlands. So thank you for coming, and thank you for all your help in making this presentation possible. To start off, again, I'd just like to say thank you for attending. And I am the acting executive director of Cybersecurity Global Alliance, a Terra Nova Defense not-for-profit, federally incorporated membership-based organization registered right here in Ontario, Canada. Cybersecurity Global Alliance has directors and officers located in Canada, the United States, Spain, United Kingdom, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Israel. We're also affiliated with the Cybersecurity Valley UK and the United Kingdom Cybersecurity Associations abroad. Tell you a little bit more about our global vision. We are creating a global legal framework to protect different stakeholders against cyber attacks. Our global mission: our organization is federally incorporated nonprofit focusing on creating global awareness regarding cybersecurity issues that affect every single one of us in the digital era. We promote and encourage different stakeholders to create a legal framework that can regulate the field of cybersecurity and its various risks. We believe that by creating an international platform for debate and interaction between different experts, actors, and stakeholders, that we can make the world more secure in an epoch when technologies are in full bloom. When we state about being in full bloom, what we mean by this is that through the use of new technologies and programs, every single transaction or aspect within our lives the protection against the different hardships or risks has become more relevant than 15 years ago, for example. It is an honor to be speaking with you this evening about cybersecurity and the CyberSecurity Global Alliance. A little housekeeping for this discussion. Please leave your questions to the end of the presentation, and both Brandon and I will be happy to answer any of your questions. Brandon is also a director within CSGA, so he will participate with those. This presentation will take about 30 minutes to complete, and extra time is being left at the end to get down to any serious questions that you may have, and we welcome your comments or questions or any considerations. In this presentation, I'll be asking you to provide certain information about cybersecurity, and please feel free to type your answers if you would like to do so. Let's get started. CyberSecurity Global Alliance is proud to announce our 10-step system that will help a potential member to join our organization and what they can do to get involved with and participate in, even on how to join committees and potentially membership and executive boards. In each step, it is important to remember the CSGA Global does not sell any service. The purpose of our organization is to work with our think tank through topics and forum challenges, working with debates and planned disputes to build the basis for global cyber law. As this is being built internally and externally, our organization will be able to provide advice of other companies, services, and/or products, making available a jobs database for global cybersecurity recruitment, and a news center that will monitor and report global news and video reports in the cybersecurity sector. CSGA Global was developed to work with people like you and I. We use a roundtable concept for gathering information and then taking this information to the board to be verified. Then to our think tank for consideration before being sent to number 9 on the graph beside us, or in front of you, for disputes and debates. Once addressed and reviewed, and once approved by this stage, this will go to the legal board for final review before being submitted to develop for global governments, which will include lobbying and demonstrating the reasons why this change to legislation is so critical, so the politics can take its course. Our members run for-profit and not-for-profit organizations, making them knowledgeable in business concepts, design, program management, education, emergency management, incident response, international and domestic law, cybersecurity, cyber defense, and in many other industries. For example, one of our directors, Chris Golden, is a former lieutenant colonel for the US military, and one of the original developers of the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, also known as the CMMC, for the US Department of Defense, DoD. Chris Golden is one of the is the owner of third-party risk operating as a C3PAO for the CMMC accreditation body, helping companies in the United States become CMMC certified from level 1 to level 3. Chris Golden's role as a director of CSGA Global is to create the infrastructure for our organization that we will follow in Canada and globally. The Cybersecurity Global Alliance consists of board members from Canada and all of the countries I've mentioned previously. The board consists of legal, cybersecurity, financial people, our program development people who are subject matter experts in cybersecurity. The purpose of CSGA Global is to work with governments and legal bodies to aid in developing global cyber law that will be regulated in a single country strategy. What this means for the world is that we can actually be the voice and to be heard on how we can start the process and to repair the damages that are around us every day that we see in the news. It is important that our group work through a variety of challenges within cybersecurity using the tools that we must provide the right information to the right people to make the right choices. CSGA Global is in the process of developing its own in-house think tank that will work with other legal groups to develop these tools, which we'll need to lobby effectively. What kind of cyber attacks are out there today? For our attending participants and viewers, feel free to list some of the current cyber attacks that are out there today. Inside the chat window there on YouTube, feel free to put some of the names of those cyber attacks. How many cyber attacks happen daily globally? And how much money do you think is being lost to threat actors? The numbers are truly staggering. At the end of this presentation, there are many key areas that can be discussed in more detail, and we welcome you to post your questions here. And at the end, we will go through as many as we can together. For me personally, I blog every day or every other day on new cyber attacks, ransomware attacks, and more. Then the question arises to how many attacks are real, how many are fake, how many are scams. Then you have phone scams and all of the other contributors to why we have so many threats currently out there today. The need for Cybersecurity Global Alliance is now. Statistically speaking, here's a list of current states well worth mentioning, or stats well worth mentioning. The worldwide information security market is painting a bleak cybersecurity landscape. In 2020, this brought with it several trials and triumphs. COVID-19 has forced companies to create remote workforces and operate off-cloud-based platforms. The rollout of 5G has made connected devices well more connected than ever before. All this to say, the cybersecurity industry has never been more important. These recent events and these cyber attack statistics and figures considered are some industry trends and also predictions to watch out for in 2021 and beyond. Remote workers will continue to be targeted by cyber criminals. As a side effect of remote workforces, cloud breaches will increase. The cybersecurity skills gap will remain an issue. As a result of 5G, increasing the bandwidth of connected devices, IoT devices, will become more vulnerable to cyber attacks. Cyber attacks will continue as long as legislation isn't being used globally. Global governments will need to come together through organizations like CSGA Global to create long-term compliance and regulation available for all people. CSGA Global, through our think tank and other serving committees, will have many current and relevant topics in cybersecurity, as you hear about today in global news. We hear about ransomware and cyber attacks, phishing and fake news, and all the phone scams. The world seems to have gone crazy. Bitcoin is one of the top 10 currencies in the world today, and yet Bitcoin is the currency taken through ransomware. The truth behind this currency can scare many people, and yet our economy protects this currency with privacy rights and rules that protect the people who do these attacks in the first place. CSGA Global is about to make laws and work with people in changing the issues and the laws like these that are preventable. But without legislation, the attackers will walk away unscathed. According to Cybersecurity Ventures, it has been estimated that the latest forecast for global ransomware damage costs reach $20 billion by the end of 2021. On CNBC, in the Small Business Playbook, it has been mentioned that cyber attacks cost companies $200,000 on average, putting many out of business. 43% of cyber attacks are aimed at small businesses, but only 14% are prepared to defend themselves. In the world today, both for-profit and not-for-profit organizations are being attacked. The successful attacks are usually done through unsuspecting employees that have not been trained with real-time information to know what to look for, while other issues are staged within organizations throughout current and ex-employees who have a vendetta against the company for their termination. There are so many examples of this that we see every day, and a lot of it that remains hidden inside the news. CSGA Global has legal teams who will aid in the development of legislation advisory and others engaged in doing demonstrations to the government to demonstrate the severity of a cyber attack to today's business. Our first presenters from Cyber Ranges is a key example, also members of CSGA. Cyber stalkers are known for stalking kids and adults alike, utilizing fake news to damage another person's reputation or to embarrass them, losing friends, employment opportunities, or the ability to survive day to day. There are smart people in the world today that use their knowledge to hurt others for fun or to threaten a person for ransom. CSGA Global will work with the courts and lawmakers to help these victims clear their names, removing these attacks that usually result in such huge devastation of the person and their family, even destroying relationships, and some who end up committing suicide. As there are really no services for adults, as no laws are being broken. It is not against the law to get online and slander somebody and thinking that the police are going to come to your door. It's just not going to happen. It is time for change, and here at CSGA Global, we are working to create a better world that will stop these attacks with the support of our government worldwide. In Canada and the world today, there is a true need for organizations like ours to work together. Organizations like the UK Cybersecurity Association and the Cybersecurity Valley UK are all working together to provide real-time information to its members. It is important to mention that the CSGA is an organization that must vet our members to make certain that threat actors will not be able to get into our ranks to use this information for their cyber attackers' bent interests. Each member must complete a detailed application. Then each member will be interviewed by a select CSGA board-appointed member, at which time you will be asked several questions about you and your past, including employment and locations where you may have volunteered. References may be requested based on the role or position that you are applying for. This process is for the best possible protection of this organization and your privacy inside our organization. All board members will be issued with materials to best fulfill their individual needs and roles. And due to COVID-19, our meetings will be done online until 2025. We hope that you will consider joining us and working with the CSGA soon. Cybersecurity is becoming an increasingly central facet of national security. Within this realm, CSGA's work covers topics like cyber warfare, encryption, military cyber capacity, hacking, financial terrorism, and more. A rapidly evolving technological landscape is changing the very definition of warfighting. CSGA's work, legislation, and compliance are in similar areas which will examine cyber warfare, cyber terrorism defense, and military technologies, and much more. In the 21st century, many of the countries in the space sector seek to leverage space for strategic and economic advantage. CSGA examines the technological and budgetary issues related to the space and cyberspace sectors and how they affect national security interests globally and other spacefaring nations. Research areas include space security and advances in commercial and civil space capabilities and in hypersonic and quantum encryption technologies. Recently, the Biden administration made an announcement that companies should realize the severity of cyber attacks today. The realism is that most people do realize the severity. As there are no laws, governance, or violation for people to attack people through the internet and no way to unmask these attackers, the answer is in lawmaking and building rules that will remove a cyber hacker's rights to privacy and expose these people. CSGA-GLOBAL is looking to develop some tools that will help people identify cyber stalkers, attackers, hackers, ransomware groups, and more, into making these people known and then to remove their rights from using other people's or business companies for hunting people, corporations, or acting out in a manner soon to be identified as an act of terrorism. Thank you very much for attending our Cybersecurity Global Alliance corporate presentation. For those people attending this evening that are not part of the CSGA, and for those people involved in the cybersecurity sector, I would like to invite you to join the Cybersecurity Global Alliance free of charge for your first year, if the conditions are met as mentioned during this presentation. For more information, reach out to me by email and I will forward you an application and you can join the international or Canadian individual title with all the privileges included in membership. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask Brandon and I will be available to answer any of your questions. Thanks again. All of my information is here on this slide and feel free to reach out with questions either online or offline.
Awesome, James. Yeah, we got a couple questions coming in. I'm going to just pull them up here. I know you're asking about some malware. So Mike was saying here, malware, phishing, SQL injection, and of course, denial of service attack when you're asking different types of breaches and compromises, different types of attacks. George was mentioning here a group believed to be Russia's Cozy Bear gained access to government and other systems through a compromised update to SolarWinds Orion software. So Mike's saying that's true. And then George was saying here, ransomware hit at least 6 U.S. hospitals in 24 hours this week, prompting the federal government to warn healthcare providers about the threat. What else we got here? Mike also said several CEOs sexting Zoom ransom scandals have brought serious scrutiny onto the platform data security. And then Mike said, yeah, great presentation.
Well, thank you. This industry is so diverse with all of the changes that are currently happening. There are not-for-profits and there are for-profits working in this industry throughout. Mm-hmm. The purpose of CSGA really brings down subject matter expertise and people who care about change. I just saw your question, Mike, and I'll be happy to answer that.
Yeah, so let me bring this on the screen here. Sure. So Mike asked, how does China and Russia factor into this framework given the conflict of interest?
Well, for our organization, this organization will not work with countries like China or Russia due to the current political situation between our countries and the constant threats. So it doesn't mean that we will not work with people of these cultures around the world. It just means that we have to be careful in the decisions that we make so there is no conflict of interest. The building of the CSGA is really to developing subject matter expertise, and I know I say that a lot, to coming back to the table, working together and creating laws. These laws will affect the actions, not only the people in China, not only in Russia, but in Canada, in the United States, and all other countries where hacking happens. It just doesn't stop there. But when Canada, I'll give you a fine example to answer that question. Let's look within our own borders. If you're a Canadian citizen and you pull a cyber attack, no, let's spin that around. If you're an American and you do a cyber attack on a Canadian and you set up in a Canadian internet provider and then attack them online, the police cannot investigate because you are developing a website over the border. This means that international laws do not permit this kind of thing from being stopped. It has to go through the Superior Court of Justice or the state legislator. You have to bring in politics to it, and that process can be very timely and costly. So when we look at the problems outside of our borders, maybe we should also be looking at the problems inside and trying to solve the problems together. We have one of the greatest allies on earth, which is in the US. Now it's time to work together, strategize, build responsible laws that mean something. And if we need to prove our point, I think Michael and Al would probably be two guys I would like to see there demonstrating that exact purpose.
Right. And I think I want to add to that. I mean, the CSGA, I guess what you want to call as mandate is to help to create these controls, these, you know, agnostic types of policies, governance, laws, so that the people that we know, organizations, companies that are getting, even military, are getting compromised. There is actually not only NIST, ISO 27001, you know, different types of, you know, controls like that, but actually looking at the implementation of if someone does breach that and takes a malicious act, how they're being held accountable. And I think that's the question we have as we're building this out, is looking at all these new frameworks and controls are out there, but what happens when someone actually does actively go out and try to maliciously compromise a company, organization, government, whatever, what happens to them? I know from personal experience, listening to stories of family members and people that have got compromised, breached their identity, things like that, you know, from large service providers like your telecommunications, your internet, like all that, and they've been compromised, that they've lost everything, their identity, their bank account information, all that, because these companies are not securing them. But then when they go and try to now criminally investigate, their hands are tied. I know one situation, a colleague of mine, his daughter's going through right now. The judge said it's not in the real world, so why does it matter? It's not in the real world. It's not an active threat. Why does it matter? And he said that in court, and the police and everyone were like, we're dealing with this daily and how people's lives are being destroyed. And you're telling us that this doesn't matter because it's not an active physical threat. And this is the things that we're looking at to really educate the communities, legal, government, that these are active threats. They can destroy people's lives. They can destroy people's business. They can take organizations down. And it's only a matter of time before we look at actual, you know, threats. I mean, I think it was in Germany, wasn't it, James, where they actually attacked a hospital?
Yes.
Right? And started to ransomware the hospital, where now people were actually now their health be affected. IC units, respiratory, you know, machines, you name it, like scanning units, whatever that may be, they'd start to do that. It's only a matter of time before now there's loss of life. And I know right now I'm studying my CSSP, and the one mandate that it all has across cybersecurity is supporting life, right? Life comes first, right? Protecting people. So I know I got a little bit on my soapbox there, but I think that's the reason why the mandate from CSGA is to really dive deep in this and have all these experts worldwide to work together.
You know, we've talked with a lot of different politicians about what would the next steps be once legislation is created. And there have been some very good ideas that have crossed the border. You have a database for sexual offenders. You have a database for violent offenders. There should be a database for cyber attackers. So people in the world can pull up on the database and go, before I employ this individual, I want to know about this individual. People should have the right to understand if a person is responsible for an attack. Because under new legislation, if you have a cyber attacker utilizing your office computer in order to attack another person, and if it passes to become an act of terrorism, you will be arrested as an accomplice.
Mm-hmm. Now, George brought up a good question here. He said, is a cyber criminal considered an enemy combatant?
Well, it would be if there was legislation. Because right now there is no such thing as a cyber criminal. George, maybe you could explain to me, in your opinion, what you think a cyber criminal is in the current legislation, the way it is now in Canada or the United States, please. And you're in Houston, so let's start on in the U.S.
So, you know, one thing I want to bring up here is, he's a cyber criminal considered an enemy combatant. Now, when you say enemy combatant, now you're looking at a terrorist, you're looking at something along that line, and it has to reflect that same type of impact. That's when you start to say enemy combatant. An enemy combatant against an organization is not defined as an enemy combatant. That could be espionage, something along that line, where it's more business terms, where an enemy combatant is now when you're looking at taking down a hospital, multiple hospitals, you know, taking down a power plant. You know, we just had, you know, you're talking about the oil. That now is starting to kind of, you know, phase over to that enemy combatant. And we're starting to get that, but it hasn't been clearly defined yet.
See, I think what we also need to identify here, and outside of George's points, and I see what you're saying, Brandon, is that here in Canada, we have actually in the US as well, we have the mens rea and actus reus, guilty mind, guilty act. We have to prove more than 50.1% that the person was responsible for the act. When a person masks their identity in the internet, just because they say person X did this attack, doesn't mean they necessarily did anything wrong. It could have just been somebody else. It could be fake news. We need to create laws so we can track in real time these people. And believe me when I say this technology is on its way.
Mm-hmm. So let's see what here. We got Carlita asked the question here. The victims of cyber attacks deserve red rest too. So,
you know, actually, I'm going to spin back to George's definition there just quickly. Enemy combatant is a person who either lawfully or unlawfully engages in hostilities for the other side in an armed conflict. I really hope that is not going to be lawfully, because that would be really bad. But
well, I mean, let's talk about that. There is teams that are now nation state, right?
That's
we
right.
know that. There are nation state teams that are hacking each other governments back and forth. And it's lawful.
Yeah, it is. But it's not illegal because there are no laws being broken.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to do a public address that you're going to threaten somebody or threaten their life, you're breaking the law because you are threatening a person. But if you take somebody's information and go broadstream and just create fake news, like what we've seen all over the world in the last 2 years, again, just tell me what laws are being broken. Slander and libel takes about 6 months to 12 months just to get through the first door of the courtroom, and you have a lot to prove. Right. This is the terrifying thing, Brandon, and for everybody watching today, you know, I would like to come up with the easy solution and saying, poof, here it is, new law, everything is great. But you know what? CSGA has something that nobody else does. It has a beginning and a vision to doing something great with all the people of nations from around the world who want to see an end to the abuse through the World Wide Web.
Right, for sure. Yeah, and I think the one thing we have to look at too, and you know, George is commenting about that, is non-repudiation, right? So when you look at non-repudiation, you got to prove that that person did it, and there is no question right? You can actually trace it back to that individual. Now, like we're seeing in different, you know, tools and techniques they use, from spoofing IPs to, you know, hopping different addresses and using other people's computers. Right now, you're looking at forensics. It's harder. I'm not saying it's impossible. It's just a lot harder to tie it down to a group, like a person, a group, an organization. You know, because there's groups out there that are doing this sometimes, right? And then it's hard to tie it down to that one, you know, area now. We're currently, right? So that's what, you know, these are things we're working on, right? These are things that part of CSGA is to have these conversations.
So, you know, cybersecurity is just a general term for many of the mechanical industries out there that utilize chips. How many computer chips do you think run technology in the world that can actually be hacked today? Nearly everything.
90 to 95%.
Right. My coming working with the emergency management sector and unmanned vehicle operations, some of the biggest things that scare us in defense and terrorism is somebody flies over an armored drone over top of heads where nobody can see it, and somebody hacks in and then fires that on an unsafe population. Who's to blame? The drone pilot, the person who manufactured, or all of the above? And usually the courts will drag everybody through until they find the person responsible. And if it is a clear hack, there may not be any way to find it out, but somebody will always take the fall.
Right, for sure. Got another comment here from Cleto. She said, making a global instrument like a treaty will be also a good idea, but would certainly countries ratify such legal instruments? That's also a problem.
She's right, it is. But the thing is that what we're trying to do through legislation and law is to create deterrence. Now, I mean, when we get into a car, for example, most people usually listen to the speed limit, or they don't go 20 kilometers or 10 miles per hour faster than the posted limits. Why is that? It's because it's a law. We understand that if you get caught, there will be penalties. Right now, there are no penalties. So the question comes down to, are you breaking any laws? So this is our biggest challenge.
Mm-hmm.
If we can create legislation that governments in two countries can operate, you know, would just be a fine thing. I will tell you, I know a family in the US. Daughter got attacked by the kids in the school, and she took a gun and ended her life. Now, I mean, the end scope of this is, what was it over? And they didn't like her because she looked different, because of what she wore, and they just destroyed this girl, destroyed the family. What is the point of that? And then the parents can't get any closure, going like, why can't we do something about this? Because there are no laws. We can talk about this until we're blue in the face, or the cows come home, or it can fly, but it doesn't change. George, you're saying cyber attack and cyber warfare, however, are not so neatly defined in U.S. statutes. Absolutely correct, but then again, it's not defined anywhere in the globe. So it doesn't matter where you go, it doesn't matter what you do. In cybersecurity, there are no borders. There are no friends. There are no laws. It is the Wild West. If you think about the U.S. in the Wild West years, just walk in the street, shoot somebody down, walk away, hey, it's done, it's over. Cybersecurity may be a totally different concept, but imagine a World War III, not with missiles, not with weapons, just cyber warfare. Cyber warfare has the ability to close down our entire infrastructure. Imagine shutting off all the lights in New York City, all the street lights, stopping all transportation for one single day and seeing what happens. Destroy all the lights and the water. I mean, the acts of terrorism could be global and catastrophic, just equally to an environmental disaster. We need to be prepared. We need to work together. And you know what? Everyone talks a great game, but CSGA is going to put this thing together. We are going to push this through. And people like Carlota, for example, she's a recent graduate working in law in The Hague. You know what? I've seen a lot of movies about war criminals being tried in The Hague. I got to say, I envy her for grabbing such a hard field to dive into. But we also have legal advisors coming onto the team that want to start this process because they know that it has to happen. And if we don't, what are we creating in the next 20 years?
Right, for sure. Now, any final thoughts, James?
I think we pretty much covered all of it, Brendan. Really, the CSGA is going to continue to build and develop and grow in Canada and around the world, developing our legal teams and think tanks. You know, I'm an ambassador for the EU Commission, and we've seen a think tank grow up to over 30,000 members in 65 countries, and it took us 3 years to do. I believe that CSGA, with the current avenue that it's currently on, we will be able to do that in 1 to 2 with all of the devastation that is currently in the world today, as long as we can work together.
Awesome. So guys, what I want to recommend for you guys is to keep up to date on what's going on with the cybersecurity industry, what's happening in your organization, your company, your colleagues, your friends. Always have these conversations, what's going on, just kind of keep your ear to the ground. Keep coming out here once a month to get your, you know, in-depth knowledge of how we're kind of looking at CSGA and, you know, different types of cybersecurity solutions and technologies that we're talking about. I know George just said so CSGA means, and I'm just going to put this on the screen so you guys can see it. So CSGA means that there will be eventually be a whole new group of sheriffs in town. It's possible. That is a possibility.
Maybe it'll be a new Judge Dredd. No, I'm sorry. That's totally off the wall.
Yeah, don't go that way. But yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, just keep up to date what's going on. We need more experts. We need more people like you learning about cybersecurity, sharing your knowledge, sharing your information as you go in the industry and evolve. We need people like you to kind of be involved in this and to make sure that we're all growing, because at the end of the day, it's going to be a global effort. It's going to be all of us working together.
Absolutely agreed.
Now, it's got one last question. I think Mike was saying here. We'll bring him on the screen here. The asymmetry of the threat versus the cost of defense are real issues. Strategically, you can defend a target all the time, as Brandon mentioned about the cyber range certification time. So yeah, I mean, there's lots of tools, lots of things that are coming out, but just keep learning, keep you know, your ear to the ground. It's so important to be able to do that, because I mean, at the end of the day, it's going to be us that's going to be growing this, right? So us going to be helping people, organizations, government, military, all that protect themselves.
And, you know, on a final note, I'd like to thank all of the different directors from CSGA that are online tonight.
Oh, for sure. There's so many out here that are coming out and just being involved and being involved in the conversation. So I want to say, look, our next presentation is going to be in a month. Make sure you subscribe to the meetup group. If you guys have any questions, reach out to James or myself. And yeah, we're just here to help you guys, you know, protect your organizations and make sure you guys, you know, stay safe when you're working with technology.
Take care, everyone. Thank you very much for your time. And it was great talking with all of you this evening on such important topics.